Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amanda and I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm going to be sharing my July wrap up. So let's go. All right, y'all. July was a really good reading month for me. I read 12 books and had one DNF. 50% of my books were print and 42% were audio, and then I had one that makes up 8% that was digital. So I think this is the first time that I've read a book on my Kindle, and it was really great. I don't know why, but I don't usually read books on my Kindle. I've just never been drawn to that. But after this one that I read on there, it was actually a really good experience, and I enjoyed having my Kindle available kind of anywhere. It was easy to take with me, and it was just a really good experience. So I'm going to be doing more of that in the future. As far as the number of pages in the books I read, I had 33% of my books were fewer than 300 pages, and 50% of my books were 300 to 499 pages, and then 17% were 500 plus pages. So I had a few chunkers in there, and you'll see that when I share about them, but that's a pretty good mix for me. I tend to stay in the 300 to 400 page range, so I had a couple shorter ones, a couple longer ones, and I think it was a good mix. All right, so let's get into the books. First, I'm going to talk about the book that I DNF'd, and that was The Lottery and Other Stories by Shirley Jackson. This is a book of short stories in the horror genre, and when I went to the library to get it, I really just wanted to read The Lottery, but I thought I would try the whole book since The Lottery was in this book. And so I read The Lottery first because that was the one that I had heard about and the catalyst for me getting this book from the library. So I read that one, and I really liked that story. It was super creepy and definitely what I expected from this book of short stories. Then I started reading the other stories, and there were a few good ones right at the beginning. There were a couple good ones, but I just got to the point where I didn't really they weren't as creepy as I thought that they maybe should be, and maybe I just didn't get it, but there were just several that seemed like I got to the end and I was like, okay, so I think that the rest of the stories just weren't really for me. So I got about halfway through and stopped because I just wasn't enjoying them, and I wasn't getting what I wanted out of the stories. So I would say that if you like those type of stories, like if you like Shirley Jackson, I don't know, I'm reading one of her books this month. I'm going to be reading it soon, so I'll see how that goes. Maybe reading an actual book of hers will give me a better idea of the type of author that she is, but I just wasn't really a fan of the rest of the short stories in that book. Now for the books that I did finish. So I'm going to start with the ones that I don't have physical copies of, and then I'll get into the ones that I have in front of me. The first book I'm going to talk about is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is a young adult fantasy, and I really liked it. I'm trying to read more fantasy, so this was kind of a step in that direction. This book follows Bree, who is at UNC Chapel Hill for a program for high schoolers where she's living on campus, and her mother has recently died, and I think it's the first night she's there, she witnesses a magical event, and that kind of sets her off on this whole journey into finding out more about her mother and herself, and I don't want to give too much away. It's very good. Fantasy is not like one of my go-to genres, so I'm learning to like it. I listened to this one on audio. It was very good on audio. But if I compare it to one other fantasy that I read this month, I definitely like this next one I'm going to talk about more, and that is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. I listened to this one on audio as well. Really well done on audio. And yeah, so when I first finished this book, I was like, oh, I like it. It was good. I liked it. But it has really stuck with me, and the more I think about it, the more I really love it. This book is like a detective mystery mixed with a fantasy, which is really good if you are trying to get more fantasy, but you already like mysteries. So that's me. I already like mysteries, so it kind of gave me a little bit of something I already love into something that I don't love yet. So that helped me really get into this book. The two main characters are a detective, I think her name's Anna, and her assistant, Din. Man, I really love their banter, their relationship. The detective is very quirky. She wears a blindfold a lot of the time. Very strange, but obviously very smart and very good at what she does. So yeah, if you like fantasy, I think you'll love it. If you like detectives and crime novels or mysteries, and you're not sure about fantasy, I think this will help you really come to love fantasy, at least in this way. I really loved it. I think it's one that I want to read again, because I feel like there were so many like details that I didn't catch everything in my first reading of it. So I would definitely want to read it again. And I mean, it made me laugh, but it also had, it was really well done fantasy, I felt, and a really well done mystery. So I think to be able to combine those two things is really cool. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Mother-in-Law by Sally Hepworth. So this is an author that I've heard a lot about, and she has a lot of books to read, but this is the first one that I've read by her. It is a mystery thriller, and you follow, I think, Lucy, and it kind of details her relationship with her mother-in-law, Diana. So this is one that I can't really say too much about without giving things away, but I found it very interesting, the dynamics between the characters. There's a lot of that in all of the books that I've read this month. There's a lot of relationship dynamics, and I really like that in my books. I like complicated relationships, and I also like, the more healthy, engaging relationships. But this one is a tough relationship between the mother and the daughter-in-law, or the daughter and the mother-in-law. It was really good. I enjoyed this book. I listened to it on audio. It was great on audio. And if you like mystery thrillers, I think you will like this one. It's good. All right, the next one I want to talk about is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Oh, guys, I love this book. This is a science fiction book that follows Ryland, who is a school teacher turned astronaut, and he basically is sent into outer space to save the world. And you really don't want to know much more than that, but man, I love this book. It's so good on audio. If you're going to read this book and you can tolerate audiobooks, definitely recommend it on audio, because given that it's outer space, there are alien life forms, and there are some noises that the narrator did an amazing job working into this audiobook. It definitely enhanced it for me, I think. I don't think I would have gotten quite as good of a relationship with the characters if that hadn't been the case. But I loved the ending. I loved the relationship, again, the relationships between the characters. I found this book so fascinating. The main character wakes up and doesn't know, like, you start with him waking up and he has no idea where he is or why or how. And he just kind of has to figure it out as he goes. Very good sci-fi. I didn't know that I could love sci-fi so much, but if you are looking for like a toe dip into sci-fi, I think this would be a really good place to start. The next book that I want to talk about is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is also science fiction, but it also has a horror element to it. I really love this book, y'all. So there's a group of scientists that are going out into the on this huge boat into the area of the ocean where the Mariana Trench is, because on a previous science mission, another boat went out and there were no survivors. So the main character, her sister was on the original mission that went out to the Mariana Trench area and never returned. So she's going out there because she wants to find out exactly what happened. The characters are fascinating. There's all different kinds of characters on this boat, right? You have security, you have scientists, you have the captain and crew, and everyone is kind of at different places and what they think they're going to find. I think you find out pretty early that there are rumors of mermaids that are attacking people. And so they're going out there knowing that that's a possibility. And I just really loved it. It was pretty fast paced. This is the book that I read on my Kindle, and it was great that way. But just a fascinating, like, it's one of those books where I stop and think, like, how does someone come up with this, right? I mean, the story is really good and fascinating. Is definitely a page turner. I was like, I need to know what happens. So I read it pretty quick, and I would definitely want to read more by this author. The next one I'm going to talk about is also in the horror genre. This is Diavola by Jennifer Thorne. So this follows a family as they go on a vacation into Italy, like in the countryside. It is a haunted house-ish story, and the thing I loved about this was the family dynamics. Oh man, family dynamics can be really fascinating, and this family is very dysfunctional, and them all being together is kind of like, why would you do that? Why would you all go on vacation together and stay in a villa with very little contact with the outside world? It's a recipe for disaster in and of itself, and then you add the horror element of this and it gets really interesting really fast. This is a pretty short read, very fast read. You will want to know what's going to happen next. A lot of the chapters are really short, and I think that's great for this type of book where you have lots of things happening really quickly, and for it to be a page turner, I think that really helps when the chapters are really short and you're just like flying through them and you think, oh, I can just read one more. That's how this was for me. It's definitely a horror book, so it is a little bit scary and a little bit creepy. So if you don't like that, you're not gonna like this book. But if you can tolerate that, I think the family story in it is fascinating as well. So I got a lot from this book and I really loved it. It was one of my favorites this month. So if you could tolerate a little bit of horror, I think you would really like it. The next book I want to talk about is it's one of my favorites from a duology. I read the first one earlier this year and have talked about how much I love the main character in this book. This is The Surgeon's Daughter by Audrey Blake. And before I talk about the book, I learned something about the authors of this book. Audrey Blake is a combination of two women who met each other like at a writing conference or something and decided to work together under this Audrey Blake name to write these books. And I think that is so cool. I can't believe it, but it makes me love these books even more. I cannot believe they're written by two people. They are so good. And anyway, this book, The Surgeon's Daughter, the second, follows my favorite, Nora Beatty, who is living in 1800s. Well, she's moved to Italy, but she was originally from London, and she goes to Italy to become a doctor. She's going to medical school, and she can't do it in London. It's not allowed yet. And so she goes to Italy and leaves behind her beloved father figure, Horace, and her love interest. This book did not disappoint. It was easily as good as the first one, The Girl in His Shadow. It's historical fiction, so if you like that kind of thing, I think you will love it. I love reading historical fiction from all different time periods, and this one is also has a medical has a lot of medical information in it, which I love that combination, because I think it's hard to think about a time when women couldn't be doctors. And so I love Nora Beatty. She's just as feisty in this novel, just as vulnerable, just as wonderful. I love these two books. I would recommend them to anyone. I am so grateful to the person who recommended them to me. And I think you will love them if you like historical fiction. She's a wonderful character, and the two authors who have combined to make Audrey Blake, I would read anything that they write. So I think they have another book coming out or recently came out, so I'll be reading that one too. All right, now for the books that I have physical copies of. So I'm on a quest, as you know, if you've been around for a while, that to read the Chronicles of Narnia books this year. So I finished this month The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis, and it was great. I haven't really enjoyed following the Pevensie children. This one does not have the older two kids in it. They are too old to go back to Narnia, and so it is just Edmund and Lucy. I love following their adventures, and this one did not disappoint. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to continuing the series. All right, the next one I read is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. So I actually listened to this one on audio, and I'm really glad I did it that way. The audio was really well done. I think the one that I listened to was read by the author, so that's pretty cool. This book is, I think pretty well known. So it's set in, I think, like the early 20th century in the rural South, I think, like Georgia. And it follows, there's two African-American sisters who are separated, and a lot of this is written in their like letters back and forth, or the one sister talking to God. And this book is, a lot of it is very hard to read. It's sad and emotional and give you some feelings, and I expected that going into it, so I wasn't surprised by that. But I'm so glad I read this book. It gave me a different perspective. It is sad in parts, but it also has a lot of hope in it, and there were some parts that made me laugh out loud. So definitely, I think everyone should read it. This is one that I do think everyone should read. And listening to it on audio was really good. It gave you the accent and the like kind of like the cultural language of that area at that time. And I really like that because it helps me kind of picture the characters even better than I think I could have if I read it on my own. I know there's a movie for this with, I think, Oprah in it. I really want to watch that now, having read this book. That will be happening soon. But yeah, I think it's really good and really eye-opening and an important read for everyone. All right, the next one I want to talk about is Sipsworth by Simon Van Buie. This book is so good. Oh my gosh, I love this book. This is about an elderly woman who has lost her husband and her son, and she goes to live in this town. I think it's the town she grew up in, but she is obviously very lonely, and you know, she's kind of facing the end of her life alone, and really just doesn't have a lot of hope in that season. She comes across a small mouse and forms a relationship with the mouse, and I love it. The other thing I love about this book is, surprise, the relationships that end up coming this woman's way because of that mouse. And this is not a fast-paced thriller, that kind of book. This is definitely kind of a slow relationship building, character building, but it is pretty short. Yeah, it's like 200-ish pages, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I love the main character. I love her journey through this time in her life. I think if you're looking for a book that shows a lot of kindness and empathy in a world that is sometimes pretty harsh, you will love this book. Okay, two more. So the next one I'm going to talk about is the one nonfiction that I read this month, and this is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. This is a super important book that I think everyone should read. It is the story of Henrietta Lacks, who was a African-American woman living in the 50s. She had several children. She had a really rough upbringing, and then she got cancer fairly young in her life, and still had small children. Her cells were taken from her cancer cells were taken out of her body. They were taken without her consent. So this book follows that story and kind of how it played out from the 50s when she was sick and eventually passed away, all the way to pretty much present day, with the reverberations of that through her family and how it has affected her children and her siblings. And as someone who's worked in the medical field, a lot of this, I've never heard of the HeLa line of cells, but her cells were used to find, I think it was it tuberculosis? There was a disease that they were used to develop a vaccine for, and just so many amazing scientific discoveries came from this woman's cells, her cell line, that it's really astonishing that more people don't know about it and about her. This book, it is nonfiction, but a lot of it reads almost like fiction. You get to know, I would say characters, they're not characters, they're real people, but you get to know the people involved in this story so well, and I feel such a connection to them after reading this, almost like they're characters, not like they're real people. So I think this is a really enjoyable read. There were a few parts that got a little sciencey, even for me, and I don't really mind that much. But yeah, there were a few parts where I was like, ooh, like you could just leave that out. You know, kind of a lot of detail that you don't necessarily need, but you could just skip those parts. I think everyone should have to read this. It is really informative, but also a really great story about a whole family and how this one event has affected them forever. And the last one that I finally finished this month is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This is a big book. This is, let's see, I think it's 849 pages. So it's a big one. I'm gonna set it down because it's gonna make my arm tired. This follows a man who comes across basically a time traveling portal. It takes him back to a particular day in 1958, and every time you go and come back, it resets. So if you go and you change history, or if you change some things, if you change the way life happens, and then you come back, the next time you go in, you're starting over, which is a really interesting concept. And anyway, this man is convinced by the person who introduced him to the portal to go in and try to stop the assassination of JFK in 1963. So I thought that's what this book was going to be about, and it is. That is the general plot. But I learned a lot of history from this book that had me kind of researching, well, what really happened. And you learn a lot about Lee Harvey Oswald, and I was, are these things true? And fascinating. But the thing that surprised me about this book is the way that I really loved the characters. The main character is just someone that I grew to really love, and there's a lot of comedy, there's a lot of sad, there's a lot of wonderful characters that you get to know and love over the course of this book. So overall, I would say this book was a lot more than I expected, and I loved it so much more than I thought I would. This was recommended to me by my dad, and I had seen it other places, so I was kind of like, yeah, okay, like I'll read it because my dad loves it. I'll read it. I love this book. I would say it's one of the best books I've ever read. You got to be in for the long haul. It's a long book, but I promise you it's worth it, and I promise that you will meet characters that you really grow to love, and by the end you won't want it to be over. This is the first Stephen King I've read, and I will definitely be reading more by him in the future. All right, so those are all the books I read in July. Have you read any of these books? I would love to hear what you thought about any of them that you've read in the comments, or did you find one that you are putting on your TBR to read in the future? I would love to hear it. So now for the kindness moment. Today I have a quote from Maya Angelou that says, "My wish for you is that you continue to be who you are, to astonish a mean world with your acts of kindness." And I love that. I think that in a world that is sometimes really mean, our acts of kindness they are astonishing. They make people step back. They make them gasp and say, wow, like I just witnessed something really beautiful. So I think let's keep astonishing the world with kindness, y'all. And on that note, go out there and be kind to someone today, y'all.